Hello, hello, hello. Welcome in to another episode of the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast on the Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast Network. I am, of course, not your host with the most time on his hands. He decided to spend all the time that resides upon his hands elsewhere this week. He is watching a hockey game for our American listeners or Australian listeners or any other listeners. That's a game usually played on ice between people with sticks. They hit a rubber puck around. So Tom is not with us today, but of course I am with you as always. Jacob Sanderson, FF_RTDB, and joined by my side as always is Big Billy FF. How's it going, Billy?
I am really excited to be back on here talking. I was going to say with y'all, but with you, Jacob, because truly it's just you.
Just a little, just a little one.
Yeah, I'm talking with you this week. It's been a rough one. I'm real excited to be back. Just talk about what I enjoy. Pure, unadulterated football. It's been a fun week. It was a wild week of football. I know you didn't get to tune into too much of it, but yeah, everything went wrong. Everything went right. Devontae Parker had 150 yards. So yeah, that never happens.
Did that get you the
things
win
go normal.
in our league where I traded you Deontay Parker? Was he in the lineup this week?
I doubt he was. I doubt it. But you know what? I bought into Devontae Parker, and at least that little bit made it worth it.
Yeah, it was a big week for wide receivers named Devontae or Devonta, but not Devontae Adams. So it was a big week for Smith, for Parker, not so much Adams, although he does get in the end zone. Had an okay week. Quickly here, before we get too far, and we're not doing a stat corner this week. It's going to be conversational. So in lieu of that...
It feels mean if I just do it to Jacob.
Well, I mean, I enjoy it, but I'll appreciate your pity. Maybe in lieu of a stat corner, if there's just a stat or just a play or something, what was like one thing that really hit you from this week before we move into our regularly scheduled week 4 programming?
Yeah, it's... I mean, the biggest stat that I keep seeing is a lot going around with the Eagles offense. I think my favorite one from this week is the player with the only player in the league with no danger throws is Jalen Hurts, like interceptable passes. He's on fire. And going back to a couple stats I tweeted out after week 1, Devonta Smith had the bleakest outlook after week 1. He was not being used downfield. He obviously put up a giant goose. His air yards were not significant, which is a big deal considering last year that was what he was propped up by. And all of a sudden yesterday, I mean, he stopped looking like Tyreek Hill, this really fast burner that creates significant separation. And all of a sudden he was DeAndre Hopkins. Everything that was contested, Devonta Smith came down with, which I don't know what to make of that. I don't think Devonta Smith is a contested catch receiver, but he's proven me wrong. What a crazy, crazy turn of events for the Philadelphia Eagles, who look like, unless the Packers offense wakes up, they're going to walk to an NFC title game.
Oh, please, baby. Please. I mean, everybody knows at this point, I've talked about my Eagles future bags enough that I don't need to belabor the point, but fly, Eagles, fly. That's all I'm saying. Fly, Eagles, fly. Please keep flying.
And good for them.
It's awesome to see, man. Smith, Brown, Goddard. Smith and Brown look like they're going to be dueling with Hill and Waddle for the rest of this year. I drew a lot of parallels between those two situations with, a quarterback coming into year 3, a star wide receiver that gets traded into that spot, an existing really promising year 2 wide receiver. And I thought there was a lot in common to both those situations. And that remains to be the case because both have been so impressive thus far. I hadn't watched some of the games, so unfortunately I didn't get the chance to have too many things that stuck out visually, just from being able to watch it. But I would be remiss if I didn't at least quickly just celebrate Khalil Herbert, one of my favorites in my little Oliver Twist Artful Dodger gang of backup running backs. RB1 overall in the week. That was awesome. I already told this to the patron chat, but this goes to any listener. If anyone is able to make an all 22 cut up of every Khalil Herbert touch from this past week, I will be forever in your debt, and I will just watch that as I do nefarious things for the rest of the week.
Great.
Before we get into the main program here, we got a question from Depeche Patel. Let me know what you think of this trade in a Dynasty League. Traded away Brandon Ayuk and a 2023 second-round pick for Alvin Kamara. 2-1 to start the season. Needed running back depth. I'm assuming that you traded your own 23 second. So, you're off to a decent enough start. 2-1. Probably team gets improved short term by this. I have no issue with this deal. I think it's fine. I'm assuming that the team that you traded with probably looking to sell off this year. If I had Kamara, I'd probably rather try to get a first out of it, rather than kind of to hedge my bet a little bit more. But I mean, I think it's a good player. 23 seconds, decent asset. Certainly two things I'm willing to give up for a short-term producer. I'd much rather give up this than give up like a first-round pick. What are your thoughts on this one, Bill?
Yeah, this is a quintessential, sell your old running back to a contender trade. Like, someone gets a lot of young pieces. Brandon Ayuk is, who knows what's happening with the 49ers this year. I'm going to talk about them a little bit later. But, he's a young, talented player, and you get a second in a deep draft class on top of it. I'm completely fine with this. You offload some younger assets that may not produce a whole lot this year to make your chances of winning a championship all the better, which at the end, that's why we all play the game. I completely fine trade on both sides.
Yeah, totally agree on all accounts there. I will say quickly, this is a great time to do some shopping, right? Go check in on the 0-3 manager in your league. Go take a look at their roster, see what they got. I know a lot of managers. I certainly was this manager. After 0-2, if you have a good team, it's like, oh well, I still think I have a good team. Just 0-2, we can rally back. 0-3 is getting to the point where even if you have faith in your team for the rest of the season, you might have to go 7-3, 8-2 the rest of the way to lock up a playoff spot. Bye is probably out of the question at this point for most 0-3 teams. And so, you do kind of have to start to wonder, is this the year, right? Even if you think you can dig out of it, you're going to be hard pressed to do so. And I think one note I'll give to any 0-3 team is look at your trade deadline, right? I think if you had an 0-3 team that's not intentional, you were coming in, expect to compete. Maybe you still have faith in the team, but unfortunately an 0-3 record is standing in your path. I think you should really look at the trade deadline, because what you almost will be assured is not going to happen is that in week 10 or 11, you're probably not going to have a playoff spot clinched. So if you have a trade deadline that is before you're going to know if you're going to get into the playoffs, I'd be more inclined to start selling, or at least be open to selling, because you really don't want to be in the spot where you're going all in for a push for the 6th seed, and you end up not getting there. That's probably about the worst place you can be in a dynasty. League. If the trade deadline is like the same week as the end of the regular season, or there is no trade deadline, there's a lot less risk to just sticking at it and trying to keep going and pushing for the playoffs. And you can always adjust a little bit later. Any thoughts on that, Billy? Any thoughts on what to do if you haven't have an 0-3 team?
Yeah, right now I'm still gonna, unless hope is gone for your team. Trey Lance knocked out, a lot of your team is banged up. I still would have a tentative hope that you can sneak into a playoff spot right now. Like you said, the hopes of a bye at this point are probably gone, just because a lot of teams that are good right now are going to be good the rest of the year. As much as we make jokes of the 3-0 that's last in points for, that's a pretty rare occurrence, especially in Dynasty. So I think realistically, now is at least the time in Dynasty. You should be taking assessments of your team and what the rest of the league looks like. Look at the matchups you have coming up too. If you can get ahead of a trade frenzy that's going to start occurring in the next 3-4 weeks, now is a good time to do it, because now is when the real discounts on freshly injured players are going to become very, very popular. DeAndre Swift is put up nothing this week. If you could go sell something,
probably going to miss 2 weeks now.
Yeah, if you could go sell something right now to a fringe team and get DeAndre, go for that, because that's going to be so good for you.
Agree with that. Quickly, Blake says, talk to us about King Hollywood. Well, he got a lot of targets, and that resulted in a lot of fantasy points. And Cliff Kingsbury's offense thinks you want to claw my eyeballs out with a spoon, but I still appreciate the PPR points.
The Cardinals are bad in surprisingly almost every facet of the game.
Oh, yeah.
And Hollywood was targeted at a huge rate. I really don't think there's much else to say about that. He's going to be at least good the next 3 weeks. Once Hopkins comes back, we can hope that means the death of Dortch, but it might just be like the rest of that entire wide receiving core. You just aren't that interested in, because I mean, how much production is going to come from them?
Well, Hollywood Brown, wide receiver 8 so far on the year, shockingly.
Yeah.
Very, very under the radar, wide receiver 8. Doesn't feel like it's going well, but it's actually going pretty well. All right, we'll be right back. We're going to pick up with the waiver wire game for week 4. Back in just a moment. All right, last week we debuted the wonderful waiver wire game. And the way that this works for anyone who didn't join us last week is that each of us got 100 free agent acquisition dollars for the entirety of the year that we can spend on anyone that we like at any time. Each of us gets the opportunity to nominate one player per week for waiver wire acquisition. You get to hold that player for the rest of the season. And every time that they score above wide receiver 24 or running back 24 or tight end 12 or quarterback 12, their respective position, you get to bank the points above replacement towards your season-long score. The only catch, you can only roster any 3 players at one time. So once you get to rostering 3 players, if you bid on somebody else, you also have to drop one of your other 3 players. Last week, the nominees were Garrett Wilson, Jahan Dotson, and Raheem Mostert. Tom is the holder of Jahan Dotson. Billy is the holder of Jahan Dotson. Tom has Raheem Mostert. I have Garrett Wilson. This week, none of them finished in the top 24 in scoring. Garrett Wilson with 12 points, so serviceable. Raheem Mostert and Jahan Dotson were not good this week. If they ended up in your starting lineup, hopefully better weeks are ahead. Tom is not with us today, so he did not put in a nomination, but Billy and I both nominated players earlier today. Those bids are in, and the winning bids will be revealed in just 1 second. The 2 nominated players are Khalil Herbert, fresh off his RB1 overall performance against the Houston Texans. David Montgomery has been labeled as day-to-day. It is possible we see Herbert in a feature role in week 4 against the New York Football Giants. And the other one is Mac Hollins, fresh off an absolute explosion against the Tennessee Titans, the new alpha of the Raiders offense, above Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, all these jabronis. It's Mac Hollins' season. Those are the 2. And I can now reveal, drum roll, that Billy has acquired Khalil Herbert for 40 free agent acquisition dollars.
Yeah,
his overall
I
total.
spent a bit here.
He spent a big chunk. I will go live to this reaction in 1 second, but first I will also reveal that Mac Hollins has been acquired by Jacob Sanderson for 1 free agent acquisition dollar. Billy had 0 free agent.
I put a fat 0 and I was excited about it.
All right, so Jacob's team is now Mac Hollins, Garrett Wilson. Billy's is Jahan Dotson, Khalil Herbert. Tom remains with only Raheem Mostert. Talk to me about Khalil Herbert. I just sort of shouted him out. I'm about as excited as you are. You spent $40. He's now proudly within your possession on Team Billy. What are your expectations for Herbert? Maybe for as long as Montgomery's out, if at all. And then do you think that his performance means that he might have a larger standalone role than he was seeing previous to this game?
Yeah, I legitimately think that the deal with Khalil Herbert is so long as David Montgomery is out, he is likely to perform as a middling RB2 at worst. Like that, given the state of the running back position, getting a player who can produce as a star, which he did last year when David Montgomery was out, and he's already done this year when David Montgomery is out, I mean, he looks like a difference maker in that offense. You could make a very strong claim that they won that game because of Khalil Herbert. But I also think that means he plays himself into a role moving forward. And maybe that means David Montgomery misses 2 weeks, whatever. Khalil Herbert will probably hit the threshold above RB24 those 2 weeks. I feel pretty confident in that fact. But the fact that he was already at least a portion of this offense being used in this offense, and he looks better than Monty, and in all likelihood, I think that's earned him a role once Monty comes back. And it's not rare for like RB1Bs in a committee to put up 2 touchdown weeks. So we're all looking at the threshold here for RB24 or points above expectation. I think my Jahan Dotson pick last week, that's a long-term pick. I think maybe he starts hitting them more later on in the season. I think Khalil Herbert is going to be that guy who just periodically is going to keep hitting that threshold. I think there's a lot of good coming for Khalil Herbert. I think he probably earns that role next year because if I remember correctly, the Bears didn't pick up Monty's 5th year. So
he was around 3 picks, so he's just on a 4-year.
That's right.
They didn't extend him.
I'm thinking of Jacobs. So Monty is probably gone at the end of the year. And I mean, who's to say Khalil Herbert isn't the running back of the future for Chicago? Because it looks like they got a screaming value on him.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what teams are going to do. Obviously, we've seen teams repeatedly just totally cock their talented running backs that they get for nothing. But I mean, certainly what I would do if I was the Bears and wasn't a very good team is I would just spend nothing on my future running back next year and roll with the round 6 pick that's already on your roster and is highly effective. And I hope that that's what the Bears decide to do. It's an exciting time to watch a young player to blossom in this way.
To add one more thing, the Bears, I believe, currently are projected to have the most cap space next year by a pretty big margin. If they use a lot of that money on David Montgomery, I feel good for the Packers for the next couple of years.
It sounds like something the Bears would do for almost certainly. But
they're still paying Tariq Cohen.
Yeah, exactly. Tariq Cohen will be giving up a good portion of that. All right. We talked about the waiver wire game here that we just closed out. Billy gets the big prize of $40 on.
Wait, you're not going to talk about Matt Collins?
No, I'm not going to talk about that.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
That's probably fine. I can't believe you put $1 on him.
Well, I've been trying to game out the optimal strategy for this game, and we'll see. We'll see. Maybe this was a bridge too far to go to the Mac Daddy, but
yeah,
I just want to kind of hold 3 players. That's kind of where I'm at. But anyway, we just talked about the waiver wire game, and we talked about Khalil Herbert as standalone role. Well, of course, there is one format where you don't need to worry about when a running back at a timeshare is going to get 2 touchdowns. There's one where you didn't have to know that David Montgomery would get hurt on his 3rd carry of the game against the Texans in order to start Khalil Herbert. And you weren't tilting, getting called the worst manager in 12 different leagues by Sleeper because Khalil Herbert was on your bench. Because how could you have known that David Montgomery was going to enter himself immediately in the smash of all smash spots for the Chicago Bears? Yeah. That's because there's one form of football where you don't have any of these concerns. That's best ball. That's on Underdog Fantasy. And Underdog Fantasy, there are more ways to play than ever before on Underdog Fantasy. You can invest in best ball. Like I just talked about, Best Ball Resurrection is up and running. That closes at the end of week 6. You can build unique teams right now. The leader in Best Ball Mania was drafted in May. So you can create unique teams by drafting ahead of time, ahead of the game. Get started on Best Ball Resurrection now. Or you can play every single week with Underdog Fantasy in their brand new Pick'em game. You just pick over or under on your favorite or least favorite player stats. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players, and you can take home cold, hard cash. Use code FULLTILT and get your first deposit up to $100 doubled by Underdog Fantasy. I appreciated Underdog very much this week because I had Khalil Herbert on so many benches in all my managed league teams, and it was so tilting. But then I got to check Underdog, and all of his points counted. And that was That was truly beautiful.
It's got to feel good.
All right. We're going to take another very short break here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do the main course of the program. We're going to talk about the week 4 picks. We will be back in just 1 second.
I have successfully adjusted my lamp so it doesn't look like I'm podcasting in front of a door to heaven. So
honestly, that was an incredible lighting change in 10 seconds. You should be proud of yourself.
Thank you.
You showed a lot of lateral agility.
Thank you. My vert's going up.
Your three cone, the shuttle, all those things. Andy says the Bears are the future Packers. They'll refuse to pay or draft wide receivers, aren't they? It does seem possible. Granted, you know what? I thought all this time that it was dumb that the Bears didn't have any wide receivers. But then now I realize they never intended on throwing a pass. So it actually makes sense that they didn't invest in wide receivers. And frankly, I'm really grateful that they did it because, like, could you imagine if they took someone that we really liked in round 2 of the NFL draft and they'd be stuck on the Bears? We'd be miserable.
Do you know Joe Flacco has had more passing attempts in every game this week than Justin Fields has on the year?
No, that's your Billy Sack corner. For sure.
Yeah,
that is
it's it hurts. All right, we're going on the tangent. There's no way this is really what Justin Fields is, right? Like, are we?
I have no idea. The Bears won't let us have any idea whether or not that's the case.
Like, I can't bring myself to believe that if Justin Fields was given 40 pass attempts a game, that he'd throw 8 interceptions. Like,
likely.
It's bizarre. Like, it really feels like the Bears just decided we're not winning anything this year. We're not going to throw the ball. Like, I've never seen a team, at least in my recent memory, do what the Bears are doing with Justin Fields.
Yeah,
like,
I
can't think of anything even close to it.
It's definitely one of the most bizarre subplots of the season so far. I mean, I just feel like it has to balance out at some point. But yeah, I mean, if you have any Bear that's not a running back, right? Like if you have Mooney, Kmet, Fields, it's just over. You just can't start them. Right.
Hey, Kmet finally got a fantasy point though.
Round of applause for Mr. Kmet. All right.
Boy, tight end sucks.
I don't think anyone's picking a Bear in this week's picks. But that's what we're about to do is the week 4 starts of the week. Last week, I had Marcus Mariota, Travis Etienne, Elijah Moore, and George Kittle. Really, really just mediocre performances all the way around. Tom had Jared Goff, Darrell Henderson, Michael Pittman, and the Conk Daddy, Tyler Conklin, had a big hit on the Conk Daddy. The rest were kind of okay, kind of all right. Not so much for Darrell Henderson. Billy comes in with Ryan Tannehill, a nice performance. Rashad Penny, Jahan Dotson, Irv Smith. Ends up being that Tom won the week last week. I was second place. Billy finished in third. However, the overall scores have Tom remaining in the lead at 178, Billy at 156, and myself at 137. So I got some ground to make up here. I'm going to quickly run through Billy's.
I think you got a good shot to make them up here. I like your picks.
I'm praying.
Can't lie, you got them in after me, and I still like your picks.
Well, that's the disadvantage that I give myself every week by putting them in 2 minutes before we go live. So that's on me. I'll quickly run through Tom's. Tom has Geno Smith, Khalil Herbert, Rashad Bateman, and the Conk Daddy once more. Billy, who are your picks this week?
Yeah, I took Trevor Lawrence. I've been saying this, and I don't know if I have this in the show sheet here, but Trevor Lawrence looks like the number 1 overall pick that he was selected as. Like, he just looks good again, and Doug Peterson has been good for that offense. They're playing, I believe it's Philadelphia this week. There's going to be a lot of good there. They're going to have to throw the ball. I think Trevor Lawrence is a stud this week. I got Dameon Pierce at running back. I think he's the only piece of that Houston Texans offense right now. Davis Mills is digressing fast. I don't know what's happening.
I
But
believe rug wrestling might have been the word you're looking for.
yes, rug wrestling.
Davis Mills just gets up to the line. He's like, yeah, I don't really want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Talk about something else.
He's just putting off the plays. That's what the Broncos are doing. They just keep putting off plays.
They're digressing.
I got Chris Olave at wide receiver, as I'm sure Jacob's about to talk about. Jameis just keeps airmailing the ball, and I think more of those are going to go to Chris Olave. And then finally, I got Evan Ingram. Look, Darius Slay is going to be all over the wide receivers for the Jaguars, and I mean, Darius Slay looks really good right now. Like, maybe the problem, but and because of that, I think Evan Ingram is going to get a lot of love. I think the offense is going to have to run through at least the wide receiver 2 and tight end position, especially with the run defense that the Eagles have. I think there's a lot of good here right now for Evan Ingram to kind of blow up this week.
I like that one. Honestly, that's got to be the game of the week, right? Like, I'm pumped to watch that game. Like, we get to watch 2 quarterbacks on the rise, 2 teams that are really playing ahead of expectations. Doug Peterson revenge game. That's so much fun.
Yeah. There it is. Evan Ingram going out to drop more passes in Philadelphia like he did for years.
Yeah, no, it's funny. We get Evan Ingram playing against an NFC East team. We get A.J. Brown playing against an AFC South team. It's just like old times.
Yeah, we did it. I think you're gonna want some pieces of the Jaguars Philadelphia game. Like there's a lot of good pieces in there. And definitely. Now, Jacob, the picks I arguably enjoy more. Come on out with them.
Well, I was going to take Evan Ingram, so you did steal one of mine. Quarterback, as you alluded to, I'm going to take Air Jameis, Flamus. I'm going to take Winstones. Look, Jameis Winston has been absolutely airing the ball out with hit and miss success so far through 3 weeks, but he does lead all quarterbacks in the NFL with an 11.5 average depth of throw. So that is, really, really giving him an upper tail when he's able to connect. He connected with Chris Olave. He connected with Traquan Smith. Both had over 100 yards in this past week. It sounds as though Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry are more likely than not to be active in week 4, coming off of what were reportedly minor injuries. So expected to have his full trio of Thomas and Olave and Landry all available to him. Really, really fun spot, I think, for Jameis Winston against the Minnesota Vikings that have been certainly gettable this year. Jared Goff and the Lions were able to score plenty of points last week. So definitely excited to roll out Jameis Winston. Breece Hall, I don't know what happened in week 2 when they started giving Ty Johnson a bunch of random work, but that at least evaporated back into thin air in week 3. Breece Hall played essentially a 50-50 split in snaps with Michael Carter, but he ran a lot more routes. He saw 11 targets this past week. It seems as though it's really a focus for them to utilize Breece Hall in the passing game, at least when he's on the field. And that's really, really exciting. That's what we want. And so in a game against Pittsburgh, where the Jets probably won't be in this like constant, like big trail script that they've been in the entire season, they might also actually get to establish Breece Hall in the running game. And I'm really excited to see what he can do. So I like Hall. I like Carter as well this week. I like both the Jets running backs in this spot against Pittsburgh. On the other side of that game is Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson has been doing Deontay Johnson things and getting 1 million targets. Just has not found the end zone yet. Mitch Trubisky probably in a make or break spot right now for honestly his like NFL career.
Yeah, Pickett is coming.
So I think that he's going to get opportunities probably in one of the softest matchups remaining on his schedule with the New York Jets. To be able to hang on to his job. He knows where his bread is buttered. He's going to be going to Deontay Johnson. I expect Johnson to have a nice game. And then I'm going back to what I did last week. It didn't actually work last week. Of course, he played. We didn't do anything. But I'm going to take a risk on the injured tight end because tight end is so bad. I feel like I can get a 0 from any of these bums. That the reporting was that Schultz would only miss 1 game. And so Schultz is down there at tight end, I think 18. And I'm expecting him to play in this contest. We'll see. I'll take the 0 if it doesn't work out. but I'm hopeful enough. And if it does happen, then Dalton Schultz gets to play against Washington Commanders. Probably Michael Gallup's first game back as well. I expect him to get several targets.
I feel like in the almost 3 years that we've done this game, we've played this trick so many times where we're like, guy coming off the injury, this is it. I don't think it's ever worked.
No, not once.
I
did it with AJ Brown one time. It worked great. That was the one time.
All right.
In San Francisco when he had like 30. That was the only time. And then I've continued going back to the well against my better judgment ever since. I think it's our game that causes the failure. It's like the karma. It's like, oh, you're screwing around with this.
Oh, I gotta go off on a tangent. There's this guy in my work league who we have the running joke that every quarterback he plays is just like freaking out because week 1 he played Dak Prescott. Yeah. Week 2 he played Trey Lance. Week 3, because both of his quarterbacks he drafted got injured, he picked up Tua off his week 2 high. So he's hurt now. So Carson Wentz is in the draft slot now. Don't play him this week. He's going to get hurt. Like, this dude is having bad luck. Like,
we got a question from BV. Although, I'm sorry, BV, but I don't think I'm necessarily going to agree with the premise of your question here. He says, random question on... He's showing the rust that old, previously injured players get with rebound injuries. Is Michael Thomas at least doing well analytically with targets per route run or other metrics? Well, I mean, one metric that he's doing pretty well in is fantasy points. He has 17 fantasy points per game. What are you mad about? I mean, he left. He had, I believe, 20 points at least in his first 2 games. Let me just pull up here. So I actually have the stats.
To sympathize with what BV is saying here, I get where he's coming from. After like his first week back where Michael Thomas had a really good game, it feels like he's kind of slowed down. And I mean, this last week, under 10 fantasy points. That I understand.
The third quarter.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. But I mean, still, you don't want Michael Thomas leaving in the third quarter. Like, I think a lot of what we're seeing here comes from the resurgence of Olave, Jameis not being the best, and the I mean, there is still the lingering threat of Jarvis Landry taking away volume. But I mean, it's Michael Thomas. Like, Jameis Winston is going to air the ball out, and I think that's going to lead to a lot of targets for Michael Thomas. So I really don't see what you're doing. I don't see the option to like bench him.
Yeah, I mean, he played the first 3 games back in 2 years. He had 8, 557 and 2, 9, 665 and 1, 5, 549 in this one, and he ends up leaving in the third quarter of that game. So 17 fantasy points per game with a partial game mixed in. That being his worst performance, he has 9.9. That's not a league losing performance by any stretch. Not worried about Michael Thomas. I guess I think that maybe his like upper ceiling probably a little lower just based on how good Chris Olave looks. But I mean, I'm not concerned. I think at the very least he's a all-year wide receiver 2, and at his draft cost, that's a smash.
I mean, to go back, like what we remember Michael Thomas as his 2019 season. First off, I don't think he's ever going to come close to that again.
He wasn't drafted to be that. Like, he was drafted.
No, not at all. But I mean, like I feel like people aren't realizing the difference between what that season was. Like, he's averaging 50 less yards a game. Right. Like that season was historic. And I mean, Michael Thomas, he's 3 years older now. And playing with younger talent too. Like, I think there's a lot there that's affecting Michael Thomas, but I mean, I think he's going to be fine the rest of the season. I don't think he's going to be, the wide receiver 6 at the end of the year, but he's probably like the wide receiver 17, to 15.
Right. And where he was drafted. I mean, that's a huge win. He wasn't even drafted.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
People hate targets for fantasy points. Yeah, I hate both those things very much. All right. We went through all of our picks of the week. To repeat, Tom has Geno, Herbert, Bateman, the Conk Daddy. Billy has Lawrence, Pierce, Olave, and Ingram. I have Jameis, Breece Hall, Deontay, and Dalton Schultz. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit of Dynasty, some players that stuck out. We're going to talk about some difficult lineup decisions. And we're going to finish it off with a pick and play for the week. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, let's talk about things that stood out. Billy, someone that I literally did not know was an NFL player until about 300 or so days ago, apparently stuck out to you. I didn't see a second of this game, so I can't refute it. Bennett Skowronek, the Scow Man. What stood out to you about Mr. Scow?
The Scow Man is a very good one. I know he's never going to use it, but I like the Scow Man. Yeah, so players that stuck out to me, I feel like I need to take Ben Skowronek. Just because he's producing as the type of player that becomes a bigger part of his offense. Look, Ben Skowronek, it's very rare we're going to talk about players in this segment that are on Dynasty waiver wires in like deep, deep leagues. But Ben Skowronek has been on the field a lot for the Rams, more than you probably want him to be. And he's also making so many good plays away from the ball. Like, if you want a good video this week, go watch a video of Ben Skowronek flattening a 300-pound defensive tackle for the Cardinals. Like, puts him on the ground. And you can make the argument, bad block, shouldn't be allowed in the NFL. I don't disagree with you. Many smarter people than me are debating that.
He's got the dog in him.
Yeah, Ben Skowronek's a little bit. As much as I hate using that phrase unironically, Ben Skowronek has that dog in him.
He does.
But the thing is, there is such a vacuum of passing volume in the Rams offense. Like, Allen Robinson,
Watch is very much on for Allen
yeah,
Robinson.
that meter is in like the red.
I know that he's
part
very near and dear to your heart, and I don't want to put you in a difficult situation, but looks cooked.
The Allen Robinson like washed meter is in that part of your car engine, like the one part of your odometer you never pay attention to unless it's in the red. Like, that's how scary this is right now. Like, Allen Robinson looks bad. Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers are not being used in the passing game. Van Jefferson is Van Jefferson. Tyler Higbee cannot continuously produce ever. Like there is such a vacuum here that unless these games where Matthew Stafford has to throw 30 passes or 40 passes, I mean, 20 of them can go to Cooper Kupp. But, I mean, there's going to be volume here for someone to earn a role. And sure, a lot of that probably means that nothing happens to Ben Skowronek. We forget he's on the team by the end of the year. He's going to be a funny topic on Twitter in 2 years when we're like, oh, yeah, I remember the week I had to start Ben Skowronek because everyone on my team snapped their ankle.
I mean, he's a startable player now. People started Van Jefferson last year. Ben Skowronek probably is good.
Yeah. I mean, if you're in injury trouble and you have no one on your team to play, fuck yeah, pull Ben Skowronek off Dynasty. Why not? Like, it is so rare you're going to see these players, see them developing, and be able to go pick them off of Dynasty waiver wires. Like, this is a lot of, and I know this is a bad example now because he feels like dust with what his offense became. This is what Darnell Mooney felt like a couple of years ago. Where Darnell Mooney was the 6th round pick. Everyone completely forgot about him. Tulane. And all of a sudden, like, he started making a couple plays. He started playing more in that offense. Then that one primetime game where he sauced Jalen Ramsey on a route and Andy Dalton airmailed him by like 10 yards. But like these are the type of things that turn players into bigger portions of their team. So I think Ben Skowronek has a legitimate shot he's not going to be a wide receiver 1. He's not going to be a wide receiver 2. He's probably not going to be a wide receiver 3. But for someone you can get on Dynasty waiver wires who can fill in and potentially earn their way into a bigger role, I think there's very few better players on waiver wires right now than Ben Skowronek.
Yep, that's a very fair point. Definitely someone I think that you can start in a pinch. Speaking of starting in a pinch, Blake wants to know: start, bench, or cut Curtis Samuel, Christian Kirk,
Oh,
or
this
Courtland
is
Sutton.
easy.
All the wide receivers with C names.
Yeah.
Billy,
Yeah, I'm going to start Sutton, bench Kirk, and cut Samuel.
I think I'm going to start Kirk at this point. I mean, it's just...
That's fine. Sutton is the only part of that offense. Like, Sutton feels like the Josh Allen of that offense. Like, Russell is not having any success elsewhere. And unless they're going to pull a Bears and just run it on every play, like, the ball has to go somewhere. And Courtland Sutton looks like the only NFL player on that team's pass catching right now.
Yeah,
Christian
I
Kirk is good.
I definitely wouldn't cut any either Sutton or Kirk. I'm probably cutting Curtis Samuel. Although, like, honestly, like, Curtis Samuel looks like an every week start. He's seeing a million targets. But,
Yeah. This is a hard one to cut.
Probably cut someone else if you can. But I think that the guy would start probably for me right now, honestly, it is Christian Kirk. I think he's just really been locked into a strong role with that ascending offense of Trevor Lawrence. I'm still not 100% sure. I mean, Sutton looks like he's like certainly a guy I'm happy to start every week. It's more about Kirk than it is about Sutton. I do think in Denver we're going to see that continuing balancing out. Judy 6 targets last week, had a downfield target. He only played on 59% of the snaps. He was very limited in practice throughout the week with a sternum injury. I think that he'll probably play all the snaps next week along with Courtland Sutton. I think we'll probably see a more even split like we saw in week 1 than in week 2 and week 3 where Judy was out for most of week 2 with the injury working his way back. Blake says, I say cut Sutton. Do not cut. I'm not cutting Courtland Sutton. No.
I disagree with that. I mean, of those 3, we're not. No, I got to fight back on that one. But anyway, we don't need to debate with Chad on cutting Courtland Sutton.
Who's a lineup decision? Blake, obviously, he has a tough lineup decision. What's a lineup decision you're stressing over this week?
I really don't want to play any San Francisco 49ers versus the Rams. Like, a lot of the players on the 49ers, and that was a very smooth transition. I want to give you credit for that. Natural born host. A lot of the 49ers, you drafted them as top-level players at their position, and they played horribly last week. I get Jimmy G freshly back, and I mean they had to patch together an offense, and I think there's going to be a lot of good right now. But until I see that, I'm really scared to play the 49ers where, Debo's a running back. He's going to have to run into Aaron Donald every play. And if he's not, he's going to get covered by Jalen Ramsey. I mean, like, Kittle doesn't look like himself. Ayuk looks good, but, I mean, his passing game usage is limited. Like, Wilson, I mean, can you bet against it with him on the Rams? And all that comes back to saying, do we want to play Jimmy G, who couldn't do it this week? Why do we think he's going to do it next week?
You never want to play Jimmy G. I mean, Jimmy G, the best thing Jimmy G did in that game was save himself from a pick 6 by walking out of the end zone voluntarily.
Amazing. But it just feels so difficult right now to sit back and go, yeah, I'll take Debo against the Rams. Like, as much, and don't get me wrong, you're gonna play Debo, like you have to play him. But someone like Ayuk, someone like Kittle, you're gonna play Kittle.
Have you seen the tight end position, Billy?
Yeah. But like, let's say crazy situation.
Unless you have the Conk Daddy, of course. If you want to play the Conk Daddy,
let's say crazy situation. A couple of years ago, you were doing a fantasy draft. You drafted both Andrews and Kittle. It's tight end premium.
Mark Andrews.
You're starting Andrews, but
starting Kittle on the fly.
Would you flex Kittle?
I mean, this is one of those ones where, like, if you aren't flexing Kittle and you drafted them both, like,
it's some cost.
George Kittle, but yeah, I'm probably flexing George Kittle. But I mean, he's not an easy start. He's a volatile start. He's a volatile player.
Yeah,
always has been a volatile player.
I think that's just going to be the sentiment of the 49ers right now, especially against the Rams. Like, one of them's going to produce, but I'm probably not going to feel confident betting which one.
Yeah, I mean, my tough start for sure. I'll hold the line about as long as anyone can hold a line, but it's just I'm so mad at Baker Mayfield, and I have to like put some of that anger toward myself and toward the player. Can't all be Baker's fault, even if it's mostly Baker's fault. But I think DJ Moore is going to hit the bench in some leagues this week. I think it's time. It's hard to put DJ Moore on the bench. It hurts my heart, but like even in some redraft stuff where he was going in the third round, I took him in the third round in one redraft league. We're playing Devonta Smith and Garrett Wilson over him this week, and it's an unfortunate reckoning. We brought him into the coach's office early in the week. We said, DJ, look, this is a reflection on you, but we hope that you take this message in the right way. But unfortunately, we're gonna see what's going on with some of our younger talent this week, and we expect you to bounce back quickly. But that's the kind of coaching decisions you have to make day to day with your roster. It's important that you talk to your players in a way that builds them up. Right? You don't want to have them not be invested any longer in your team. It's important to keep good morale, but sometimes you do have to go to some of these veteran players and say, "Hey, we're just going to get a look at some other options this week. We're going to see what they have to offer." And for DJ, it's time to have that difficult conversation this week. Unfortunately for DJ Moore, and I hope that he's able to demonstrate receiving the message with a 30 bomb on the bench this week. I would greatly appreciate that.
All right, Jacob, I'm going to play a game with you.
Okay.
Would you rather start DJ Moore
No.
or Allen Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Calvin Ridley, Brian Edwards, or Darnell Mooney?
Well, I think DJ Moore would probably be my pick. Maybe Juju. DJ or Juju.
This is currently my Dynasty roster. I also have Christian Kirk and Drake London, but that makes the game less fun.
Probably starting Juju there, the wide receiver 3 slot. Although I think DJ Moore versus Juju is pretty close. I think Allen Robinson he's on a bench until further notice situation at this point. I'm pretty.
He needs to start eating breakfast with Stafford.
That's true. He needs to just be a good wide receiver again. I think that's one of the issues he's facing. All right, last section. We're going to talk. We talked about the underdog ad earlier. If you're playing underdog pick'ems, remember use promo code FULLTILT for a $100 deposit match.
Oh, continue. Sorry.
You good?
Yes.
All right. You might want to consider some of these picks. So, who is your pick'em pick this week on Underdog Fantasy?
My first one. I saw this. I was so excited to get it in because it's been a while since I've seen one that I'm more confident about. And I feel bad that you also took him as your pick of the week. I don't remember who he's playing off the top of my head. I believe it's
Minnesota Vikings.
Vikings. But Jameis Winston, over 239 passing yards. That seemed like the easiest pick I could find. I mean, when that guy has a bad game, he hits 270. Like that one felt so easy to me. I was real excited to find that one and be able to get it in the doc. Jacob, what do you got?
Oh, I love that pick. We're all bored. Winston this week, all across the show sheet. I have Deontay Johnson over 59.5 receiving yards this year. He's only hit that over prop once, but 2 of his games he had 55 and 57 receiving yards, so just barely there. He has 34 targets through 3 weeks, over 10 targets per game, over 10 targets in each of his games. Now finally gets a matchup against the New York Jets that is probably his most exploitable one thus far this year. I expect Deontay to have a lot of opportunities this week to be able to perform. I have his over on the pick'em. Billy, I was wondering why we were running a little bit ahead of schedule, and he just said it in the private chat that I never got to talk about the things that stood out to me. He spent so much time talking about Ben Skoranek. I totally forgot to talk about Romeo Doubs.
Real quick before we move on, and Tom also took Josh Allen over 330.5 passing yards.
There we go.
Or total yards.
Over total yards. So we got Josh Allen over 330.5. We got Jameis Winston over 269.5. We've got Deontay Johnson over 59.5. Look, we're at the end of the show. I'm not going to say too much about Doubs. I will just say that dude looks sick. It's exciting. It's like, I don't think there's any more satisfying feeling, to be honest, in Dynasty. Like whether you're just playing or whether you're doing content or anything, than like watching someone that like you've been on for a while that wasn't like a superstar, like kind of break out before your eyes. Like it just makes me feel like a kid on Christmas morning. And I was like out for most of the day, like I said. I saw initially that he scored the touchdown. I was like, oh my God, this is so sick. And I like came back to watch the end of the game. He's making these contested catches over the middle. Went back, watched all of his highlights. It's just really exciting, man. 68.5% now route participation over the year. He had 94% of the routes in this contest with no Christian Watson, no Sammy Watkins. Has a 22% targets per route run on the year. That's by far the highest of the Green Bay Packers wide receivers. None of the other options have really been earning a lot of targets whatsoever. 1.9 yards per route run. That's borderline elite level for a rookie. I don't know what his route participation is going to be necessarily when guys come back, but like, this is kind of the talent that we wanted to see, where he'd get the opportunity, take advantage of it. I mean, to me, it's like, I don't know how if you're the Packers, you kind of put the genie back in the bottle, right? Like we know that they need wide receiver help really, really badly. Here's this young guy who's showing stuff. Like, how do you just go back to give him 30% of the routes? To me, it's like, you have to have this guy on the field. He's the guy that's making plays for you, and we can't just go be like, oh man, got to like keep throwing Randall Cobb out there for 80% of the routes. Like, got to get Sammy Watkins back involved. Like, no, stop it. Enough already. Just let the young guys who are making plays play and see what they can do. Super exciting for Dobbs. I'm so excited to see what he does for the rest of the year. Like dynasty take, yeah, sure. If you want to sell high, sell high. But just from like a football perspective, it's pretty exciting to see. I mean, you're the Packers fan, so you get in a whole different light. But
I was about to
fun
say,
to see the kid making plays. Hey,
I was about to say, imagine all that stuff you said, being in on him right away, loving everything. A little disappointed with the performance metrics at the combine. Besides the point, you love him, you love the analytics, you love his production, and then you get to watch him do it for your own team. Look, for those of y'all who aren't Packers fans, or maybe haven't followed the Packers very well, or haven't really seen some of the trends, the biggest thing with Aaron Rodgers is trust. We hear about it all the time. That's why Randall Cobb is still there. That's why Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers would throw the ball with him not even looking, because he knew he'd turn and catch that. This is the type of game that turns a player into a superstar on the Packers. Because when Aaron Rodgers trusts you and knows how you play the game, that's when two players become elite on the Packers. Like, there's so much good here for Romeo Doubs. Like, you said it perfectly, but I'm so excited having seen this.
All right, last question here. Blake says, who is the panic meter highest on, Travis Etienne, Rashad Bateman, or Darren Waller? I don't really know what the panic is with Waller. He had two pretty good games. This week was not as good, but I think, this is kind of my question about all tight ends. Like, it's tight end.
Yeah.
There's not that many tight ends that have a legitimately elite ceiling. He's also had startable production, like easily startable production in 2 of the 3 weeks. I'm not panicked about Waller really at all. Bateman,
maybe you're panicked about Waller on the draft capital you spent on him, but you're not recouping that. So ride the wave.
I don't know. I'm not even concerned about that. Like, to me, it's like, look, if you're spending early on tight end, like especially in like the early to mid, right? It's one thing if it's Kelsey in round 1, but like I think that once you get past Kelsey and Andrews, we're going at the 1-2 turn. If you're spending a round 4, round 5 pick on a tight end, like I don't think that means that they have to be elite every week. I think what you're paying for is you're paying for some level of stability, and then more so you're paying for the ability to have an elite ceiling in any given week. So I think Waller. what is he right now? And he's probably like what, tight end 5 on the year or something. I'm not sure. I haven't pulled it
probably.
Up. But like I don't think he's performing horribly. Let's see here. He is tight end 6 on the year in non-premium. Well, really the tight end 5 because Jordan Akins was active for 1 game. He had 3 catches, 31 yards, and a touchdown. That gets him up to tight end 5. So he's really tight end 5 behind Andrews, Kelsey, and then the early season standout Tyler Conklin and Ertz, who I think people kind of knew would be an early season play with Hopkins suspended. So not worried about Waller. I don't know. Are you worried about Bateman? I think so. With Etienne, it's like I'm in a weird spot with Etienne where it's like you kind of just have to readjust. I think like had we known in the summer that James Robinson was going to be this healthy and this involved, like then Etienne wouldn't have been drafted so high. But knowing that, like I don't think he's looked bad on his opportunities. I think he's performed pretty well in terms of rush yards over expected. Like James Robinson is one of the lowest rates of positive runs over expectation. Etienne's in the middle of the pack. He's been used pretty creatively in the receiving game. I don't know. I think it's like more just you kind of just have to readjust. So is he going to be what you drafted him as? Probably not. On the bright side, the Jags look really good. So I kind of look at ETN kind of similarly like to an AJ Dillon. Like he has an every week role, but his like true elite ceiling is going to depend on an injury.
In terms of pure panic, I probably feel, at least panic wise, the most over Bateman out of the three of these. And that's mostly just to say, like, I'm on your side with Waller. I'm on your side with ETN. But Bateman seems like, of these three guys, he's the only one that I'm convinced could goose on a week. Like, just like the passing efficiency that Lamar Jackson has right now is historic. Like, he's throwing 20 pass attempts and 4 touchdowns in every game. Like, he looks like what the Bears want Justin Fields to be. Like, he's on a different level at this point. But all of that is running through Mark Andrews and, to an extent, Devin Duvernay. Like, Rashad Bateman keeps getting 2 receptions and 60 yards, but it's not what you expected. Like, people thought Bateman was going to push to turn into like a Michael Thomas-esque role, where, you know, him and Andrews, these top 2 players, they both have heavy workloads. They're both getting targeted a ton. And Bateman also has that level of athleticism where he can be super efficient on top of that target share. But he's just not, he's getting that target share, but that target share translates to 4 targets, 5 targets. Like, it's going to be hard for him to become an elite wide receiver on that level of a share. Yeah. So, I mean, but even then, the draft capital that you invested on Bateman wasn't, I mean, people weren't drafting Bateman in the 5th or the 4th. They were drafting him closer like the 7th or the 8th. And at that point, take your lumps. Like,
yeah, I think Bateman. So, I mean, I'm hearing this target share is concerning. It's his routes really that's causing this. Like, his target per route is 22%. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
He's not running enough routes. Super weird. I don't know. I just kind of think like young player who's talented, who's been really efficient on his targets, who's earned targets on his routes, like, it just kind of almost has to come up. It's not like they have other players taking up space. So kind of hard to trust on a week-to-week level, but like over the long term, I'm not super scared with Bateman personally. I'm not really panicking on any of these guys, to be honest. I think just like guys to panic on far more than these three. That's it for the show. Billy, where can the people find you? What you got going on?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at BigBillyFF. I'm still trying to get the chess live streams going. Y'all can come play me if you want. Hopefully I'm going to figure that out in the coming weeks, but work sucks right now, or grad school sucks. So that's kind of keeping me from getting that going. But hopefully those should be coming pretty soon. So, Jacob, what do you got going? Where can they find you?
Yeah, man, every Tuesday, my Hitchhiker's Guide to Running Back comes out. So that came out earlier today. Pretty by far the longest one of the season so far, but we had a lot of running backs get injured. We potentially have Jamal Williams to talk about. We have Khalil Herbert to talk about, maybe Alexander Madison, even Joe Mixon got a little banged up. So lots to get through. That was a really fun article to write. We talked all about Ramondre Stevenson's emergence, talked about the Rams backfield. I did a full 1 through 20 rank of your week 4 waiver priorities, depending on the depth of your league. So make sure to go check that out. I'll be on tomorrow night, of course, with Chase and Shane for Fantasy Intervention. Drew and I recorded the second edition of Sweat and Bullets just last night. That'll probably come out at some point in time this week, whenever Matt's able to put that up for us. And then, of course, I'll be back on Friday, the Big Tilt with Chase Vernon. So another busy week. We're fully in the grind, man. Fun to do this with you, of course, every Tuesday. Fun to do this with all of you folks who checked in the chat. Thank you very much. Make sure to check us out again, of course, next Tuesday. That's all for Jacob, for Billy, for the Full Tilt Dynasty podcast on the Full Tilt Dynasty Podcast Network.